Sirens over Beirut, drone explosions above Riyadh, stock markets in free fall. And somewhere in the Persian Gulf, 500 cargo ships are sitting completely still, frozen, because the waterway that supplies 20% of the world's energy has just been shut down. This is not a regional skirmish anymore. This is not a proxy war anymore. In the last 72 hours, the Middle East has crossed a line the world has not seen in decades. And the two countries that just got pulled into this conflict could change. Gee, everything. Stay with me until the very end. Because what happened in the final hours of Day 5 will either prevent World War III or start it. To understand why Lebanon and Saudi Arabia are now in the middle of this war, you have to go back to Saturday, February 28th, 2026. That was the day the United States and Israel launched a coordinated joint operation, codenamed Operation Roaring Lion by Israel and Operation Epic Fury by the United States, targeting the heart of Iran. Not its borders, not a single facility, the heart. Tehran, Isfahan, Qom, Karaj, Kermanshah, all struck within hours. The operation was one of the most extensive military campaigns the region had ever seen, with Israel's AIR force alone dropping more than 200 munitions across 24 of Iran's 31 provinces in a single 24-hour period. But here's what made this operation unlike anything before it. Among the confirmed kills, the supreme leader of Iran, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, was dead. His compound was destroyed. Senior officials, military commanders, the head of Iran's Supreme National Security Council, all gone in a single night. The regime that had defined the Middle East's power structure for 45 years was, in a matter of hours, decapitated. Now, if you're sitting in Tehran at that moment, your supreme leader is gone, your military leadership, P is shattered, and the full force of American and Israeli air power is circling your skies. What do? You don't quietly accept defeat. You do something so broad, so aggressive, that the entire world is forced to pay attention. And that is exactly what Iran did. Because while the initial strikes on Iran were devastating, what Iran did next in the Strait of Hormuz, that will change the world forever. But we will get there in just a moment. Within hours of the strikes on Tehran, Iran activated what military analysts call its True Promise I-4, its fourth and most expansive retaliatory operation. And this time, there were no symbolic GE stirs. Iran launched hundreds of drones and ballistic missiles, not just at Israel, but at 9 countries simultaneously: Bahrain, Iraq, Jordan, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and even a British Royal Air Force base in Cyprus was struck. Think about what that means strategically. Iran was not just hitting military bases. It was sending a message to every single government in the Gulf. Your alliance with America has made you a target. Your geography has made you a battlefield, and your skies are no longer safe. In Dubai, missiles, or debris from intercepted missiles, struck near landmark buildings and the international airport. In Kuwait, sirens ran non-stop for hours, and several U.S. F-15E turjets went down over Kuwaiti territory in a catastrophic friendly fire incident involving Kuwaiti air defenses. In Bahrain, Iran targeted the headquarters of the U.S. Navy's 5th Fleet, one of the most strategically important American military installations in the entire world, multiple times. Bahrain's Inat International Airport was struck by a drone. Residential buildings in the capital Manama were hit overnight. And in Saudi Arabia, a country that had, just days before the war, reportedly lobbied the United States through multiple phone calls between Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman and President Trump to take military action against Iran, the kingdom found itself directly in the crossfire. Iranian drones targeted the U.S. Embassy in Riyadh. The embassy was struck, the facility sustained damage, a limited fire broke out, and the United States immediately closed the embassy and ordered all non-emergency government personnel to evacuate. But the single most economically consequential strike in Saudi Arabia was not on a military installation. It was on Ras Tanura. The Ras Tanura oil refinery, one of the largest petroleum export facilities on the planet, was targeted by 2 Iranian drones. Saudi Arabia's military shot both down. But the debris still caused a fire at the facility Y that feeds energy to the entire global economy. And if you think that is alarming, hold on, because what Iran did to the waterway that controls 20% of the world's energy supply will make Ras Tanura look like a warm-up. We are going to get to the Strait of Hormuz in just a moment. While the Gulf was absorbing Iranian missile strikes and the global economy was beginning to react, something happened on Monday, March 2nd, that geopolitical analysts had feared but hoped to avoid. Lebanon entered the war. For the previous 15 months, since a U.S.-brokered ceasefire in late 2024, Hezbollah, the powerful Iranian-backed militant group based in Lebanon, had not launched a single major strike on Israel. The ceasefire was fragile. Israel had continued. UDA near-daily operations into Lebanese territory. Hezbollah had stayed quiet, and the Lebanese government, exhausted, economically devastated, and desperate for stability, had been carefully, cautiously moving to disarm Hezbollah and reassert state authority. All of that collapsed the moment Ali Khamenei was confirmed dead. Hezbollah's Secretary General Naim Qassem made the decision official. The group would retaliate. Missiles and drones were launched at Israel, targeting Amet David Air Base, the Moran monitoring base, and Camp Yitzhak. Hezbollah then struck a naval base in Haifa. In the words of one IDF spokesperson, it was an official declaration of war. Israel's response was immediate and overwhelming. Within hours, Israeli jets struck Beirut at 3 a.m. Evacuation orders went out to 50 villages across southern Lebanon and the Bi-Kiotweh Valley. Israeli strikes hit Hezbollah strongholds, command centers, weapons storage facilities, and then, in a strike that sent shockwaves through the intelligence community, Israel killed Hussein Makhled, the head of Hezbollah's entire intelligence headquarters, in a single precision strike in Beirut. Israel's defense minister then authorized something that had not happened in over a year, a ground invasion of Lebanon. Israeli forces from the 91st Division crossed the border, advancing into Qiyam, just 6 kilometers from the Lebanese frontier, establishing what the IDF called a security layer. Lebanon's own army, caught completely off guard, began redeploying from newly established Beau Arder posts as Israeli forces moved in direct violation of the 2024 ceasefire agreement. More than 58,000 Lebanese civilians were displaced in a single day. Families who had already been, and the Lebanese government, facing the very real possibility of their country being pulled into a full-scale war it cannot survive, did something extraordinary. It publicly condemned Hezbollah. Prime Minister Nawaf Salam declared that any military or security action launched from Lebanese territory outside state institutions was illegal and demanded that Hezbollah hand over all its weapons to the state, immediately. The Lebanese Council of Ministers formally banned Hezbollah's military activities. It was a moment that would have been unthinkable just weeks earlier. Lebanon was not just a battlefield. It was now a country publicly breaking from the very militia that had defined its politics for 40 years, because it had no other choice. Now we get to the moment that could reshape the entire global economy for years to come. On day one of the conflict, Iran made a decision that no country had ever made in the modern era of global trade. It closed the Strait of Hormuz completely. The Strait of Hormuz is a narrow passage of water, roughly 33 kilometers wide at its narrowest point, connecting the Persian Gulf to the open ocean. It is not just strategically important, it is the single most critical choke point in the global energy supply chain. Approximately 20% of the world's total oil supply passes through this strait every single day. Nearly 20% of global liquefied natural gas exports come from Gulf producers who depend on this waterway. When Iran shut it down, it did not just affect one country, it affected the entire world simultaneously. Within 48 hours of the closure, 150 freight ships, including dozens of oil tankers, were sitting stationary outside the strait, unable to move. By day 5, that number had grown to approximately 500 ships, representing roughly 1% of global shipping tonnage, all queued outside the UAE and Oman coasts, waiting, going nowhere. The financial markets responded with immediate alarm. Global benchmark Brent crude surged nearly 10% in the first days of the conflict, climbing toward $80 per barrel. And analysts at Majo, our financial institutions, were openly discussing the possibility of oil crossing $100 per barrel if the closure continued for weeks. In Asia, where countries like India, Thailand, South Korea, and the Philippines are almost entirely dependent on Gulf oil imports, energy security officials went on emergency footing. It was not just energy. The ripple effects moved through every sector of the global economy at once. European stocks fell sharply. The Pan-European Stocks 600 dropped 2.7% in a single morning session, extending steep losses from the day before. Banking stocks were down nearly 4%. Insurance stocks fell over 4%. Even aerospace and defense shares, which had initially rallied on the outbreak of conflict, started retreating. On Wall Street, the Dow Jones Industrial Average fell more than 1,000 points in a single session, its worst trading day since April 2025. Companies operating in the Gulf began activating emergency protocols. Amazon instructed all Middle East corporate employees to work remotely. 2 Amazon data centers in the UAE were struck by drones. Another facility in Bahrain sustained damage from nearby strikes. German shipping giant Hapag-Lloyd and Danish giant Maersk both announced immediate suspension of all Gulf bookings for Bahrain, Iraq, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Yemen, until further notice. The message from the shipping industry was unmistakable. The Gulf was no longer a safe zone for global commerce, and if the Strait of Hormuz remained closed for weeks, not days, the economic analysts were not talking about a market correction. They were talking about a supply shock to the global economy on a scale not seen since the 1973 oil embargo. The United States, recognizing the gravity of this threat, announced it would offer insurance coverage for Gulf shipping and deploy naval escorts of UNDEFs, or tankers attempting to move through the region. But with 500 ships already stopped and Iran showing no sign of reopening the strait, the practical impact of that announcement remained to be seen. As the war entered its fifth day, the international community moved from concern to alarm. China's foreign minister called for an immediate cessation of U.S. and Israeli action, framing Beijing's positing. Ion in the starkest terms it had used since the conflict began. The E3, Britain, France, and Germany, declared they were prepared to back proportionate military defensive measures against Iranian drones and missiles, signaling that European forces could be directly drawn into the conflict. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer confirmed that American planes were already operating out of British military bases, and that RAF jets were actively shooting down Iranian drones to protect American lives across joint installations in the Middle East. NATO forces shot down an Iranian ballistic missile traveling toward Turkey's airspace, the first time NATO had ever intercepted an Iranian missile target. In a member nation's territory since the conflict began, Turkey stated it reserved the right to defend itself, and that the missile had actually fallen on Turkish soil before interception could be completed. Greece deployed frigates and F-16 fighter jets to defend Cyprus after Iran threatened to strike the island with such force that American forces would be compelled to leave. And in a remarkable development at sea, the United States Navy confirmed that a U.S. submarine had sunk the Iranian Navy frigate Iris Dana in internet Iona waters off the coast of Sri Lanka, thousands of kilometers from the Persian Gulf. Iran's naval reach, it turned out, extended far beyond what many Western analysts had anticipated. The Trump administration's public messaging had shifted multiple times across the week, from preventing a nuclear weapon to preempting an Iranian SDR. Ike, to regime change, to insisting the goal was not regime change at all, Trump stated the operation would last 4 to 5 weeks, but could go far longer. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth declared that the Iranian regime was toast. Secretary of State Marco Rubio refused to rule out the deployment of American ground forces. Iran's top national security official, Ali Larijani, gave the clearest answer to all of this. We will not negotiate with the United States. Full stop. Here is where we are right now. 5 days into a conflict that the entire world was hoping would remain contained. The Strait of Hormuz is closed, global energy markets are in shock, Lebanon is a battlefield, Saudi Arabia has been struck, NATO has fired on Iranian weapons, and a country of 90 million people is absorbing airstrikes with no supreme leader and no clear political successor in place. Every analyst who predicted this war would stay limited has been wrong. Every ceasefire structure in the region, the 2024 Lebanon deal, the 2025 Qatar arrangements, every diplomatic framework, has effectively collapsed in 5 days. But here's the question that keeps the world's most experienced geopolitical minds awake tonight. Gulf states have so far absorbed Iranian strikes without retaliating directly. They have condemned Iran at the United Nations. They have intercepted missiles. They have let American forces do the fighting from their soil. But Iran has now struck their airports, their embassies, their oil infrastructure, and their capital cities. How many more strikes can Saudi Arabia absorb before Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, the man who reportedly urged this war into existence with phone calls to Donald Trump, decides that staying on the sidelines is no longer a sustainable position? And if Saudi Arabia enters this war directly, if the world's largest oil exporter joins an active military conflict against the country that controls the world's MOST critical energy choke point, what happens to that $100 per barrel oil price forecast? What happens to global inflation? What happens to the supply chains that every economy on Earth depends on? Those are not hypothetical questions. They are questions that financial ministers, central bank governors, and heads of state are asking each other right now, in private, with growing urgency and no clean answers. What happens next will not just define the Middle East, it will define the next decade of global economic H history. And we will be watching every single development, every strike, every diplomatic move, every market signal, and bringing it to you before anyone else does. If you're not subscribed yet, now is the time, because this story is far from over.